The wind came down from the north like a living curse sharp enough to flay skin from bone. It hammered the circle of Lakota teepees strung along the frozen ash river, bending lodge poles until they groaned and sending smoke streaming sideways in gray ribbons. Men hunched near fires that gave more light than warmth. Women worked hides with hands gone red and cracked as old leather. Children burrowed deep into buffalo robes that smelled of tallow and smoke and survival. Winter on the far northern plains in the country whites were beginning to call Dakota in this year of 1854 was not merely cold. It was a test. It separated the living from the dead with brutal efficiency. Tocala stood at the pony lines, arms crossed over beaded buckskin, watching the horizon with eyes that had learned to read danger in the flight of ravens and the shape of distant clouds. 30 winters had carved him lean and hard. Eagle feathers hung from his war bonnet, each one earned in blood, each one marking a moment when he had chosen to stand rather than run. The scar along his left shoulder, where a hawken ball had torn through muscle and kissed bone, ached in the cold, like an old friend whispering warnings. 2 winters ago, his brother had died in snow just like this. White ranchers had accused Mapia of stealing cattle. They shot him in the back while he watered his horse and left him bleeding into the frozen ground. No trial, no witnesses called, no justice rendered, just a body growing cold and a lie growing warm in the telling. The dog started barking. Tocala turned. His hand found the knife at his belt without conscious thought. Through the cottonwoods, a figure stumbled into view. Not walking, staggering. Each step a small miracle of will over flesh. A woman. White. Her gray dress hung in strips, hem black with frozen mud, and something darker. Her boots had split open, exposing toes gone the color of old meat. She moved like a drunkard or a dying thing, weaving between trees, one hand pressed to her ribs and the other outstretched, as though reaching for something only she could see. Around Tocala, the camp began to stir. Warriors reached for rifles. Women pulled children behind skirts. A white woman stumbling into a Lakota winter camp was not a miracle. It was a noose being woven strand by strand, excuse by excuse. The woman's lips moved, cracked, colorless. One word escaped barely more than breath given shape. Ledger. Then her eyes rolled back, showing crescents of white, and she folded forward like a puppet with cut strings. Tocala moved. 3 strides brought him close enough to catch her before skull met frozen ground. The impact of her weight sent old pain flaring through his shoulder, but he held fast. She weighed almost nothing beneath the soaked wool. Her skin burned cold as river ice against his bare hands. For one held breath, the camp froze. Firelight caught them in silhouette, a Lakota warrior in eagle feathers holding an unconscious white woman against his chest. Snow swirled around them both. Behind the dark shapes of tippies and ponies stretched toward the river. Beyond the camp's edge on the ridge where pines grew, thick shadows moved. 3 riders, watching. Then they wheeled their horses and disappeared into the gathering dusk, like smoke pulled by wind. Tocala's jaw set hard. He knew what those riders meant. They were not scouts. They were witnesses. They would ride back to Silas McGraw and report exactly what they had seen, and McGraw would shape that truth into whatever lie served him best. But the woman in his arms was still breathing. Shallow, fast, each breath a small fight won. Her fingers clutched something flat and hard beneath her torn bodice, something she had protected even as her body gave out. Bina stepped forward from the watching crowd. Gray threaded her braids. Loss lived in the lines around her eyes. She looked at the woman, then at Tocala, then at the ridge where the riders had been. "Bring her," Bina said in Lakota. Her voice carried no warmth, but it carried command. "Before she freezes and brings the cavalry for her bones." Tokala carried the woman across camp. Eyes tracked him, some curious, others afraid, a few openly hostile. Hosa, his cousin, stood near the central fire, with one hand resting on his knife hilt. His expression promised trouble later. Tokala ignored him and ducked into the nearest lodge. Inside warmth hit like a fist after the cold. He laid the woman on buffalo robes near the fire. Bena followed, already calling orders. Younger women brought watercloth, a leather pouch heavy with dried herbs. They cut the dress away with practical efficiency. No modesty, no hesitation. Survival first. The bullet wound on her thigh was shallow, but angry edges puckered, already showing the red streaks that meant infection had started its slow crawl toward her heart. Bina washed it with boiled snow water, packed it with a poultice that smelled of sage and something bitter that made the air sting. The woman did not wake, but her breathing steadied. Color crept back into her lips, slow as dawn. Tokala crouched near the fire, watching. When they removed her dress, the thing she had been clutching fell free, a ledger, bound in green leather pages stained with water and what might have been blood. He picked it up carefully, opened it. English words marched down the pages in neat columns. Numbers, names, dates, amounts. He could read enough English to know this was not a diary or a storybook. This was accounting. This was evidence. White Hawk entered without announcement. 60 winters had carved him down to bone and will. His hair hung white as winter grass. He looked at the woman, at Tokala, at the ledger. "This brings them," White Hawk said quietly in Lakota. "They come whether we have her or not," Tokala replied. "McGraw has been spinning his web for months. Stolen cattle, raided wagons. All lies but lies white men want to believe because believing gives them what they want." He gestured at the woman. "She ran here, brought this book. That means she thinks it can hurt him." White Hawk studied him with eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. Finally, he nodded once. "Send for Kingsley. If she lives, we need a white man's word to protect us from white man's law." After White Hawk left, Tokala sat alone with the unconscious woman and the ledger, and the knowledge that everything was about to get worse. He fed the fire, watched her breathe, waited. Behind him, the woman stirred. Did not wake. But she murmured something low and desperate, a name or a prayer or a curse. Tokala could not tell which. He stayed, not because he cared about her specifically, not yet, but because she was his responsibility now, whether he wanted it or not. And in this land, in this brutal season, responsibility was the only thing that kept the darkness at bay. Dr. Amos Kingsley arrived the next afternoon on a tired mule-black bag, clutched like a talisman. Thin, 50s, wire spectacles that fogged the moment he entered the warm lodge. His hands shook slightly, too many nights digging bullets out of men who died anyway, too many children lost to fevers he could not break. He was the only white doctor in Bison Trace who would cross the river to treat Lakota sick. For that, Tokala's people tolerated him. Kingsley knelt beside the woman, checked the leg wound, the graze along her ribs where another bullet had kissed her, the frostbite blackening her toes. He worked in silence, occasionally murmuring to Bina, who translated when necessary. Finally, he sat back on his heels. "She will live, but another hour out there." He shook his head. "We would be digging frozen ground." "Who is she?" Tokala asked. Kingsley hesitated, glanced at the ledger lying near the fire. "Eliza Hart. Came west 6 months back. Answered a newspaper advertisement. Widowed farmer seeking a wife. Promised a home. Partnership." His voice went bitter. The widower was already dead when she arrived. Convenient stampede. His claim folded into Iron Horse land before the body was cold. Something cold moved through Tokala's chest. McGraw. McGraw. Kingsley picked up the ledger pages, crinkling as he turned them. His face went paler with each entry. He has been running this scheme for years. Advertises for brides, takes their traveling money, their papers, puts them to work. Some he keeps as unpaid labor. Others... He stopped, swallowed. There are roadhouses along the emigrant trail. Hog ranches, they call them. Women go in. They do not come out. Bina, listening from across the fire, spoke in halting English. My sister. 5 winters passed. Traders say he marry her. Take her to Blackwater Falls. Build home. Her voice went flat. She never come back. I look. I ask. No one see her. Kingsley's face twisted. I am sorry. Sorry finds nothing. Tokala gestured at the ledger. What is in there? The doctor's hands trembled as he turned pages. McGraw's private accounts. The deputy's gambling debts over $400. Repaid not in coin, but in favors. False reports of Lakota raids. Forged land transfers. He stopped on one page. Went very still. Freight charges. For coffins. Dated to match when women disappeared from his ranch. He looked up. If this reaches a federal judge, McGraw hangs. Then we take it to a judge. It is not that simple. A voice cut through the lodge. Hoarse, raw, but determined. Never signed anything. They turned. Eliza Hart's eyes were open, gray as winter sky, filled with pain and fury in equal measure. She tried to sit, got halfway, gasped and fell back, hand flying to her wounded thigh. Tokala moved without thinking. 3 strides put him beside her. He pressed one hand to her shoulder, not rough, but unyielding. Pushed her back down to the robes. You are not moving, he said in rough English, until you are strong. She stared up at him. For a long moment, neither moved. Her hand found his wrist, gripped it with surprising strength for someone half dead. He killed them, she whispered. Her voice cracked. The others, in the wagon, 3 of us trying to escape. A Lakota prisoner McGraw was transporting. His men opened fire on the trail. They shot the prisoner first, then Martha. Anna fell under the horses. Tears cut tracks through the dirt on her face. I grabbed the ledger and ran, kept running until I could not run anymore. Then I crawled. Because someone, her voice broke completely. Someone has to stop him. Tokala did not pull his hand away. We will. The council gathered that night. Smoke rose thick from the central fire. Men and women sat in a circle, faces shadowed and grim. Hosa spoke first, voice sharp as flint. Send her back. Let white men kill each other over their own lies. Why should we bleed for her? McGraw comes whether she is here or not, Tokala replied. He stood near the firelight, catching the beadwork on his chest. He has been building his excuse for months. This woman proves his lies false. With her, we have a weapon that scares him. A weapon that gets us all killed. Bina rose. Her voice cut through the argument like a blade through silk. You think sending her back saves us? McGraw wants our land. Wants this river. Wants the hunting grounds beyond. He will take them with or without excuse. But if we send her back, we lose the only proof we have that he is a liar and a murderer. Red Shawl, an older woman who had lost her daughter 2 winters past, spoke quietly. They said my girl signed papers, agreed to work in a house in Dust Bowl. She could not write her name. She looked at Eliza. If this white woman can speak truth and make white men listen, let her speak. Eliza met her gaze. I will speak. I will tell what I saw. Women locked in sheds like animals. Girls dragged crying into wagons bound for the roadhouses. Men who laughed, her voice caught. Men who laughed when we begged for mercy. Her hands clenched into fists beneath her blanket. But I need time. I am not strong enough yet. Not strong enough to ride 60 miles. Not strong enough to stand before a judge without falling. Takala looked around the circle, met each pair of eyes. We give her that time. Keep her here until she can walk without stumbling, ride without fainting, stand before a federal judge and speak her truth. Then we take her to Clay Bank, where law does not answer to McGraw's gold. Hosa spat into the fire. The moisture hissed. You are a fool. Maybe. Takala's voice did not rise. But I am a fool who will not watch another innocent disappear because we were too afraid to act. Silence settled over the lodge. Only the fire spoke crackling and popping. Whitehawk stood. She stays. We double the guard. Send scouts to watch the trails. And we prepare. Later, Takala walked Eliza back to the lodge where she would sleep. His hand hovered near her elbow, not touching, but ready if she stumbled. Inside, she sank onto the robes. Her exhale sounded like defeat and relief mixed together. You did not have to defend me, she said quietly. Yes, I did. She studied his face in the firelight. Why? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he fed the fire with small sticks, building it up slowly. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, careful. My brother died 2 winters ago. White ranchers said he stole their cattle. They shot him while he watered his horse, left him bleeding into snow. He stared into the flames. No trial, no witnesses, no justice, just a body and a lie. He looked at her then. I will not let that happen again. Not to you, not to anyone I have power to protect. Eliza reached into her blanket, pulled out a small metal pendant on a broken leather cord. I took this from the woman in the wagon, the Lakota prisoner. She died trying to shield me when the bullets started. I do not even know her name, but someone should have this. Someone who knew her. Takala took it carefully, held it up to the firelight. His breath caught. The symbol etched on the back was unmistakably Lakota, a pattern that meant family home belonging. He handed it silently to Bina, who sat in the shadows, mending a torn moccasin. Bina took one look and went very still. The moccasin fell from her hands. This was my sister's. She wore it the day she left, said it would bring her home. Her voice broke. It did not. The lodge filled with heavy silence. Eliza pressed both hands over her mouth. I am so sorry. I did not know. If I had, you could not save her. Bina closed her fist around the pendant. She has been gone 5 years. But now I know she is dead. Now I can mourn properly. She looked at Eliza, and something like gratitude flickered in her eyes. Thank you for bringing her home, even if only her spirit. Bina rose and walked out into the night. The wind took her, and she was gone. Takala turned back to Eliza. You carry more than a ledger. I know, she whispered, and I swear I will not let them be forgotten. The days that followed were a slow grind of healing and preparation. Eliza's wound closed gradually, but fever came in waves that left her shaking and weak. Takala would not let her push too hard. When she tried to help carry firewood, the wind nearly knocked her off the trail. He stepped in front of her without a word, using his own body to block the gusts. Stay behind me, he said, not a request. She bristled, but she stayed. On the 4th day, he took her to the riverbank, where ice still held the current prisoner. The cold bit deep sharp enough to make breathing hurt. He carried a Springfield musket and a leather pouch of paper cartridges. "You need to shoot better," he said. "I know how to shoot." He raised one eyebrow, held out the musket. She took it, felt its weight settle into her hands, heavier than she remembered. She raised it to her shoulder, sighted on a distant stump, fired. The recoil hammered her backward. The ball went wide, kicking up snow 3 feet left of target. Takala said nothing. He moved behind her, adjusted her stance with firm, careful hands, one at her hip, one at her elbow. His breath was warm against her temple. "Feet wider. Plant them. Shoulder into the stock. The musket will speak. Let it. Do not fight." She fired again. This time the ball clipped bark from the stump's edge. Better. She reloaded. Her fingers fumbled with the cold paper cartridge. One slipped from her grip and fell into snow. Before she could bend, Takala picked it up, held it in his palm for a long moment, warming it with his body heat. Then he passed it back. The gesture was small, practical, born of survival knowledge, not sentiment. But Eliza felt it lodge somewhere beneath her ribs like a coal that refused to go cold. By week's end, she could hit the stump 4 times out of 5. Takala watched her fire the last round of the session, nodded once. "Now you can defend yourself if I fall." "You will not fall," she said. The words came out fierce, certain. His dark eyes met hers. "Everyone falls eventually." "Not yet," she said. "Not while I am still standing." Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his mouth, gone before she could be sure. "Then we both stand as long as we can." Back in camp, the tension grew thicker with each passing day. Scouts brought troubling news. Iron horse riders had been spotted along the river trail, watching from tree lines, following tracks. In Bison Trace, men drank heavily and talked loudly of teaching savages lessons they would not forget. McGraw had posted a notice in the stagecoach office, $50 for information leading to the return of his bride. The word "unlawfully detained" appeared 3 times in the text. The implication was clear. Kingsley returned after a week, slipping into camp after dark. He sat with Takala, Benna, and Eliza in the council lodge, voice low and urgent. "McGraw is moving faster than I hoped. He has convinced half the town that you are holding Eliza hostage for ransom or worse. Deputy Rigby talks openly of forming a citizens' posse. I planted what doubts I could, but fear drowns out reason." "How long do we have?" Takala asked. "Days. Maybe a week if weather holds them back." Eliza leaned forward into the firelight. "Then we do not wait. We go to Clay Bank now. Take the ledger to a federal judge before McGraw manufactures enough lies to bury us all." 60 miles in winter. Kingsley said gently, "You are not strong enough yet." "Then I will be strong enough," Eliza said, jaw set. "Because I have to be." Takala studied her for a long moment, weighing. Finally, he nodded. "We leave in 2 days. Time enough to prepare. Not enough for McGraw to learn we're coming." "Who rides?" Bina asked. "You, Eliza, Kingsley, and Nikolai." The name drew surprised looks. Nikolai was the captured iron horse rider taken a week earlier while tracking Eliza. He had been kept under loose guard near the horse lines, doing whatever work was asked without complaint but without enthusiasm. Takala had been watching him. The way his eyes followed women and children around camp. The way his face twisted when men talked casually of violence. Something lived behind that sullen expression. Regret, maybe, or exhaustion. "He knows McGraw's methods," Takala said. "Knows the land between here and Claybank. And I think he is tired. Tired of working for a man who treats people like freight." "He could betray us," Hosa said. "Yes. but I do not think he will. Men who have seen enough blood eventually grow sick of the smell. They brought Nikolai to the council lodge that night. He stood in the firelight, wary as a trapped animal. His wrists were bound loosely, more symbol than restraint. Tokala stepped forward, cut the ropes with his knife, let them fall. "You have a choice," Tokala said in careful English. "Stay here under guard until this ends, or ride with us to Clay Bank and speak truth about what you have seen working for McGraw." Nikolai stared at him. "Why you trust me, I track her here." "I do not trust you," Tokala said with brutal honesty. "But I think you are tired of serving a man who makes you do terrible things that keep you awake at night. If I am wrong about you, you die on the trail, and we leave your body for wolves. If I am right, you help us end this. Maybe find some peace." Nikolai looked at Eliza for a long moment. She met his gaze without flinching. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I go. I speak truth." He paused. "But you need know McGraw will not let this book reach Judge. He burn everything, everyone, to keep secrets buried." "Then we burn hotter," Tokala said quietly. The night before departure, Eliza could not sleep. She sat by the fire in the lodge, wrapped in buffalo robes, watching shadows dance on hide walls. Her leg ached. Her mind raced through 100 ways they could die between here and Claybank. Tokala entered without sound, sat across the fire from her, said nothing. The silence stretched, comfortable, shared. Finally, Eliza spoke. "I am afraid." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive." "I am afraid." Her voice caught. "I am afraid my being here will get your people killed." He looked at her across the flames. His expression was softer than she had ever seen. "You are not the reason we are in danger. McGraw is the reason. Greed is. Men who see other people as things to be used and thrown away, they are the reason." He leaned forward slightly. "You are just the one brave enough to stand up and say it out loud." "I do not feel brave. Brave people never do." He reached across the fire, quick, natural, and rested his hand briefly on hers. His palm was warm, calloused, real. "Sleep now. Tomorrow we ride, and you will need every bit of strength." She nodded, lay down, pulled the robes to her chin. Tokala settled with his rifle across his knees. A silent guardian, keeping watch through the long, cold hours. They left at first light. The sun was just beginning to paint the eastern horizon in streaks of pale gold and copper. 5 riders, Tokala Eliza, on a sturdy pony with her wounded leg, carefully wrapped Bina Nikolai and Kingsley on his tired mule. They followed the frozen ash river, keeping to the cottonwood shadows, where tracks were harder to read. The morning was bitterly cold. The sky stretched pale and brittle overhead, promising more snow by nightfall. Eliza rode in silence. Every step of her pony sent dull pain, radiating through her healing leg. She did not complain. Around her, the others moved with quiet efficiency, people who understood that survival depended on speed, silence, and constant vigilance. By midday, they had covered 10 miles. The river bent sharply south, forming a wide oxbow. To continue following its course, they needed to cross a broad shelf of ice. Their horses' hooves rang against the frozen surface. Each step sounded like hammer on anvil in the still air. Tokala rode at the front eyes, constantly scanning tree lines on both banks. Then the first shot cracked across the ice. The sound was impossibly loud in the frozen silence, a flat, brutal crack that echoed off the cliffs. Eliza's pony reared. Eyes rolled white. Foam flew from its mouth. She clung desperately to its mane, fingers tangled, barely keeping her seat. A second shot followed. Then a third. Then a ragged volley. Bullets whined through the air with sounds like angry hornets. Ice chips exploded. Cracks raced across the frozen surface like black lightning. From the eastern tree line, riders poured out. 6, 7, 8 men on horseback rifles raised firing as they came. Ambush! Tokala's voice cut through the chaos. Move, get to the bank. Everything dissolved into nightmare. One of their pack horses screamed a horrible, almost human sound and went down hard. Its legs smashed through weakened ice. The animal thrashed wildly, eyes white with terror. Then the ice gave way completely. The horse plunged into black water with a splash that sent freezing spray across the battlefield. Within seconds, pulled down by the weight of the packs and the current beneath the ice, it vanished. Bina moved fast, grabbed Kingsley by his coat collar, and physically hauled him from his saddle. They hit the ice hard, rolled scrambled desperately toward a drifted log. Bullets chewed into the wood. Splinters flew like tiny spears. Nikolai returned fire, his broad face set in grim lines. Each shot was careful. Aimed. He fired. Reloaded. Fired again. One of the attacking riders jerked backward and tumbled from his saddle, hitting the ice with a sickening crack. Tokala wheeled his horse with the skill of someone born to warfare. He raced toward Eliza. She was fighting to control her panicked pony, which danced and spun on the treacherous surface. A bullet buzzed past her ear. So close she felt the air split. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel. She could see her own death clear and certain as sunrise. Then Tokala was there. He leaned far out of his saddle and grabbed her around the waist. His strength was shocking. He hauled her bodily from her mount just as another bullet smashed through the space where her head had been a heartbeat before. They hit the snow and ice together, rolled in a tangle of limbs and heavy winter clothing, came up hard against a low bank of ice and frozen reeds at the river's edge. Eliza tasted blood. She had bitten completely through her tongue. Her cheek burned like fire, a shallow cut carved by a flying ice shard, leaving a line of red against pale skin. Tokala grabbed his rifle and began returning fire. Short, disciplined bursts. His movements were eerily calm despite bullets snapping past his head. Each shot was deliberate, aimed. He was not wasting ammunition, could not afford to. Eliza fumbled for the carbine slung across her back. Her hands shook so badly she could barely grip the weapon. The lessons Tokala had drilled into her seemed impossibly distant academic knowledge, with no connection to this chaos of noise and death and terror. He glanced at her. Their eyes met. He nodded once. That simple gesture steadied her more than any words could have. She raised the rifle, forced her hands to stop shaking through sheer force of will. Found a target, a man in a brown coat raising his rifle toward Bina's position. She sighted, squeezed the trigger. The recoil slammed into her shoulder. Through the smoke and chaos, she saw the man jerk and fall from his saddle, disappearing into the snow. She did not wait to see if he rose. She reloaded with trembling fingers, the mechanical motions taking over, and fired again. The battle raged. Bullets ricocheted off stones. One missed Tokala's head by inches, leaving a gray streak on rock. He ducked instinctively, but never stopped firing. Another shot tore through his buffalo hide coat at the shoulder, so close it left a burn mark on the leather, but did not penetrate. Then disaster. A bullet impossible to say, whose fired from which direction in the chaos, caught Tokala low in the side, just below his ribs on the left. The impact was like being kicked by a mule. It drove the air from his lungs in an explosive gasp and spun him halfway around. His rifle fell from suddenly nerveless fingers clattering on ice. He staggered, took one faltering step, then his legs gave out. He went down hard, sprawling backward into the blood-stained snow. Eliza saw it happen with terrible crystalline clarity. Time slowed. She saw the bullet hit, saw his body jerk, saw him fall, saw blood impossibly red against white snow begin to spread beneath him in a growing pool. No. The word tore from her throat. Raw, desperate. She dropped her rifle. Lunged for him. Pure instinct and something deeper than fear drove her. She grabbed his coat collar with both hands and began dragging him, pulling his considerable weight backward toward the shallow gully that offered the only cover. Her injured leg screamed in protest. The barely healed wound threatened to tear open. She ignored it. Nothing mattered except getting him to safety. Nothing. Takala tried to push her away. His hand batted weakly at her arm. "Leave," he gasped. His face had gone gray. "Save yourself." "Shut up," she snarled with a ferocity that surprised them both. "Shut your mouth and let me do this." She kept dragging. Her boots slipped on bloody ice. Her muscles burned. Bullets continued to crack and whine around them. 20 feet, 15, 10. She hauled him into the gully just as the sky above opened with shocking suddenness. A blizzard rolled down the river corridor like a wall of white fury. One moment, there was visibility. The next, there was nothing but wind and snow so thick, it turned the world into a featureless void. Visibility dropped to arm's length in seconds. The iron horse riders, suddenly blind and disoriented, fired a few more wild shots into the storm. Then the sound of hoofbeats retreating reached them faintly through the howling wind. The attackers were pulling back, unwilling to freeze to death, pursuing prey they could no longer see. Eliza knelt beside Takala, pressed both hands hard against the wound in his side. Blood welled hot and dark between her fingers, pulsing with the rhythm of his heartbeat. His breathing was shallow, labored, each breath a visible struggle. His eyes fought to focus on her face. "Do not you dare die on me," she whispered fiercely. Her voice shook. "Do not you dare leave me alone in this. I need you. We all need you. So you fight, Takala. You fight to stay alive." Bena crawled over through the driving snow, Kingsley struggling behind her. Together, they lifted Takala's limp form. Moving through the blizzard was like wading through water made of ice and wind. Each step required conscious effort. Nikolai's shout cut through the storm. "Here this way." They stumbled off the treacherous ice, followed the cliff line by feel and instinct. Finally reached the black mouth of an abandoned silver mine cut deep into the rock face. Inside, the wind stopped. The sudden stillness felt like stepping into another world. They scraped together a fire from old timber supports left behind by miners who had chased silver and found only dust. The damp wood resisted, but they coaxed it to burn with handfuls of dry grass from their packs. Flickering light pushed back the darkness, casting wild shadows on rough stone walls. Kingsley worked by that uncertain light. His hands were steady despite the cold and stress. He cut away Takala's blood-soaked shirt with surgical scissors, exposing the wound. The bullet had gone clean through, entering just below the ribs, exiting through the muscle of his back. Miraculously, it had missed anything immediately vital. But blood loss and shock were still deadly threats. "He is lucky," Kingsley muttered, probing the wound carefully. 2 inches higher, and the bullet would have torn through his liver. He would be dead already. As it is, if we can control the bleeding and prevent infection, he has a fighting chance. Eliza tore strips from her petticoat with shaking hands. Did not care about modesty or propriety, cared only about stopping the blood. She and Bena bound the wound as tightly as they dared. Takala endured the treatment in stoic silence. His jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin, could hear the grinding of his teeth. When they finished wrapping the bandages, he slumped back against a timber support, eyes closed, breathing hard through his nose. Eliza sank down beside him, utterly exhausted. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably now that the immediate crisis had passed, covered in his blood up to her wrists. She stared at them, felt the weight of everything crash down at once. Fear, grief, exhaustion, the terrible knowledge of how close they had come to death. Tokala's eyes opened slowly. He looked at her. Despite the pain etched into every line of his face, his voice was steady when he spoke. "You pulled me out, under fire." "Of course I did. Why risk yourself?" She met his dark gaze. The truth came out simple and raw, stripped of all pretense. "Because I need you to survive this. Because your people need you." Her voice broke slightly. "Because I am not strong enough to do this alone. Not yet." His hand found hers, gripped it with surprising strength for someone who had just been shot. His palm was warm despite everything. "Yes, you are strong enough. You have been strong enough since the moment you walked into our camp half dead and still carrying that ledger." "No," she said firmly. Shook her head. "Not yet. So you are not moving from this spot until you are strong enough to keep fighting. Do you hear me?" A faint, pained smile touched his mouth. "I hear you, Eliza Hart." They stayed in the mine 2 days, while the blizzard howled outside like something alive, trying to claw its way in. Food was desperately scarce, nothing but strips of dried venison and a few handfuls of parched corn. Water came from melting snow in a battered tin cup held over the fire. Kingsley checked Tokala's wound twice each day, cleaned it with precious whiskey that made Tokala hiss sharply through his teeth, but never cry out. On the second night, with Tokala sleeping fitfully against Bina's shoulder and Kingsley nodding off near the fire, Nikolai spoke from his position near the mine entrance where he was keeping watch. He did not speak in smooth sentences. The words came haltingly, broken by long pauses. "McGraw?" He stopped, stared out at the swirling snow. "He knows you come for him now." Silence. "Before I leave to track her?" Another pause, longer this time. His thick accent made the English words awkward. "I hear him talk to Martin, his foreman." Nikolai shifted uncomfortably. "He laugh about it. Say..." He struggled for words. "Say it, perfect timing." More silence. Bina was listening now, very still. "Warriors away from camp, old men and women left behind. Children." Nikolai's voice dropped lower. "He say he ride out, with posse from town. Say he search for his bride, but really..." He made a gesture with his hands. Sharp, brutal. "Really, he surround camp while you gone. Then he do what he want. Call it self-defense, call it rescue, call it justice." His voice went flat. "No one stop him if no warriors there." The mine fell silent except for the crackling fire and the wind outside. Eliza felt ice settle in the pit of her stomach. Cold, heavy. "We have to go back. Warn them. Protect them." "No." Tokala's voice cut through the darkness. His eyes remained closed, but clearly he had not been as deeply asleep as he appeared. "If we go back now, we die. The ledger dies. McGraw wins everything. But your people..." He opened his eyes, looked directly at her. "My people are strong. They will hold as long as they can. But they cannot hold forever against false charges and vigilante justice masquerading as law." His voice was firm despite his weakness. "The only way to save them is to finish what we started. Push forward to Clay Bank. Put that ledger in front of a federal judge before McGraw can destroy everything and everyone." Silence settled heavy over them. "We go on," Tokala said with absolute certainty. "That is the only path forward." When the storm finally broke on the third morning, they emerged into a world scoured clean, white and glittering under a pale sun. The beauty was almost painful. Takala could walk, though every step clearly cost him dearly. They moved carefully through the canyon country narrow defiles carved between towering walls of red sandstone and white limestone. Places where wind had sculpted the rock into strange, haunting shapes over countless centuries. They traveled 2 more hard days, saw no one. But the feeling of being watched never left. At night, they huddled close to tiny fires built in sheltered hollows. Eliza found herself unconsciously sitting beside Takala, their shoulders touching. Warmth shared. Something more than warmth. One night when the others were asleep and the stars burned cold and bright overhead, Takala spoke quietly into the darkness. Why did you choose to stay in the territory when you learned the truth about the false homesteader? You could have demanded passage back east. Why stay? Eliza was silent for a long moment, organizing her thoughts, choosing words carefully. I thought about leaving, she finally admitted. For days after I arrived and discovered the lies, I thought about nothing else but escape. But I realized. She paused. I was so tired, Takala. Tired of running from poverty back in England. Tired of being treated like freight or property, something to be shipped and sold and disposed of. Tired of having no control over my own life. She stared into the embers. And I could not abandon the other women at McGraw's ranch. They looked at me with such hope when they learned I could read and write, that I might know how to get word out. I could not leave them to suffer alone. We need you, Takala said simply. More than you know. She looked at him, saw not just a warrior, but a man carrying the crushing weight of his people's survival on shoulders already scarred by loss. And I need you. So please do not get yourself killed before we finish this. I will try my best, he said. His hand found hers in the darkness. Their fingers intertwined naturally, calloused palm against calloused palm. On the 5th day, they crested a high ridge and saw smoke on the distant horizon. Not the usual thin trails of cook fires. Thick, black, rising in multiple columns against the pale sky. Too much smoke. Too many sources burning. That is coming from the direction of your camp, Bina said. Her voice was hollow. Takala stared at the distant smoke, his face carved from stone, unreadable except for the tightening around his eyes. Below them, across miles of open prairie broken by stands of cottonwood and willow, the Ash River camp was under siege. No time for judges now. Justice would start here or not at all. They rode hard, abandoning caution for speed. Eliza's leg throbbed, but she did not slow. Beside her, Takala rode with rifle-ready face, pale but determined. As they drew closer, the scene took shape. Wagons ringed the camp, men behind barricades firing into teepees. Several lodges smoldered. We circle west through the willows, Takala said. Once inside, we make our stand. Eliza speaks. We show the ledger. Make McGraw answer before his men. They moved through willows on foot. Inside, camp warriors gathered around Takala. A small girl lay wrapped in blankets, shoulder bandaged. Bina knelt beside her, then rose with fury. They shot a child. And they will answer, Takala said. Outside, Silas McGraw rode slowly along the line. Beside him, Martin Hale, gray-haired, deeply troubled. He had believed McGraw's talk of progress. But this felt wrong. He thought of his daughter Emily, lost to a marriage arrangement 3 years ago. McGraw leaned closer. Stay strong. Once we recover my property and hang a few savages, this river will be ours. Martin's hand tightened on the reins until knuckles showed white. Eliza made her decision. She stood and walked into the open. Snow crunched, every eye turned. McGraw reined his horse. Eliza, thank the stars, come to safety. She held up the ledger. You tell these men you came to rescue me. So tell them why Deputy Rigby owes you $400. Tell them why women who answer your advertisements never come home." A murmur rippled through the men. McGraw smiled coldly. "You are confused. These people filled your head with lies." "Am I?" She opened the ledger. "Deputy Rigby. Gambling debts $437. Repaid in false reports." She flipped a page. But that is not the worst. Her eyes found Martin. "Martin Hale, April 19th, 1853. You witnessed Sarah Henton's land transfer. But 6 days earlier, coffin freight charge. Unmarked grave." She paused. "Your signature made you accessory to murder." Martin's face went white. Color drained like life leaving. He remembered those papers. McGraw's explanation of fever. Had never questioned it. Had trusted. She flipped more pages. Margaret Cole coffin freight. Rebecca Stone. Dorothy Webb. Everyone came on his promises. Everyone died. Every homestead now belongs to McGraw. Men shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered rifles. Wait, there is more. She found a page near the back. "Martin, your daughter went east. Philadelphia. 3 years ago." Martin's face twisted. "That has nothing." "Emily Hale, age 19. Marriage contract. January 51. Advanced funds $200. Signed Silas McGraw." She looked up. And 3 months later, Hale Girl Fever property transferred. "Your daughter's dowry land signed to McGraw's partner the week after she died." Martin's world stopped. Everything he thought he knew collapsed. His eyes were the eyes of a man staring into an abyss he had never known existed. Emily, his daughter. McGraw had sold her, profited from her death. And Martin had worked for him for 3 more years, never knowing, never suspecting. "You..." His voice cracked like breaking ice. "That you used my Emily. You sold my daughter." McGraw's mask finally shattered. His hand moved toward his Colt. "Shut your lying mouth," Martin roared, drew his pistol, aimed at McGraw. "You killed my daughter for $200 of land." Other men began turning, rifles swinging away from the camp, toward McGraw instead. The power structure was collapsing from within. McGraw, seeing control slip, spurred his horse forward, drew his Colt, aimed at Eliza. "If I hang, you hang with me." Martin fired. His bullet caught McGraw's shoulder, spinning him in the saddle. Nikolai, with a wordless shout, threw himself at McGraw's horse. Grabbed the reins. McGraw's pistol discharged wildly. The bullet smashed a kerosene lantern perched on a crate. Glass shattered. Fuel spilled. Flames rushed toward black powder kegs. "Get back!" Takala shouted, sprinting toward Eliza. "Everyone back." Men scattered, some running, others frozen. Nikolai grabbed McGraw, dragged him from his horse, pinned him to the ground near the burning crate. McGraw struggled wildly, but Nikolai held him fast. "No more," Nikolai rasped. His voice was thick with smoke and something like peace. "No more women. No more lies." The powder caught. The explosion was not a sharp crack, not some theatrical thunder. It was a massive rolling whoomp of igniting black powder, a wall of fire, and thick black smoke that expanded outward in a choking cloud. The heat was instant, intense, a physical force that knocked men from their feet. The wagon disintegrated. Wood and metal flew in all directions. The shock wave radiated outward like an invisible fist. McGraw and Nikolai disappeared in the fireball. When the smoke began to clear slowly, so slowly, both men lay still. McGraw's body charred beyond recognition. Nikolai's positioned between the blast and a group of Lakota children, his final act, one of redemption and choice. Takala had reached Eliza just before the blast, pulled her behind a snowbank, covered her body with his own. one hand cupped protectively over her head. Debris rained down, splinters twisted metal burning scraps. Their breaths came ragged and synchronized. When the smoke cleared enough to see the battlefield had transformed completely. The man who led the siege was dead, killed by his own fire and his own greed. The ledger's pages, though scorched at the edges, lay scattered across the blood-stained snow where anyone could bend down and read them. Martin Hale stood in the wreckage. His face was no longer white. It was gray, ash gray, the color of something burned out from the inside. He looked at the scattered pages fluttering in the wind, at the dead and wounded, at the terrified faces of Lakota women and children peering out from behind lodges. He dismounted slowly, walked forward until he stood precisely between the camp and the remaining riders. His voice, when he spoke, carried clearly. It broke multiple times, but he kept speaking. "It is finished," he said. Silas McGraw was a liar, a thief, a murderer. He paused, swallowed hard. "I know this because I helped him do it. I signed forged papers. I looked away when women vanished. I told myself it was progress, civilization, building something that would last." His voice cracked completely. "My own daughter. He sold my Emily, sold her like cattle, and I never knew. I worked for him for 3 more years after she died, and I never knew." Tears cut tracks through the soot on his face. "I am done," he said. "Finished. Any man here who wants to keep fighting can do it without me. I will not raise my gun again for lies." One by one, slowly, the other riders lowered their weapons. Some spurred their horses and rode away at full gallop, unable to face what they had become. Others dismounted, stood in silence, waiting for judgment they knew was coming. Kingsley emerged from the camp with his black bag, began treating wounded without distinction, Lakota warrior and white ranch hand receiving the same careful attention. Eliza walked slowly through the debris, collected ledger pages with reverent care. She found Bina standing near Nikolai's body. After a long moment, Bina spoke in heavily accented English. He was not good man for most of his life, but at the end, when it mattered most, he chose to be better. That is worth remembering. "Yes," Eliza agreed softly. Takala approached Martin slowly. "You will come to Clay Bank with us. You will speak what you know before a federal judge. All of it." Martin nodded. His throat worked. "I will testify to everything. When the judge sentences me, and he will, I know that I will accept whatever comes. I deserve no mercy." "Perhaps you do not deserve mercy," Takala agreed quietly. "But first, you will help us bury our dead with dignity. All of them. Even the ones who came here to kill us." Martin looked at him for a long moment, then nodded again. "Yes, that is only right." 3 weeks after the siege ended, Territorial Marshal Samuel Pierce arrived from Clay Bank. He was a man in his early 60s with a gray beard and steady, intelligent eyes. He spent 3 long days in the camp, systematically taking statements from everyone involved. Eliza spoke first. Her testimony was clear and precise despite the emotional weight. She detailed her journey west based on fraudulent promises, her discovery of the dead homesteader's true fate, the conditions at McGraw's ranch where women were held as unpaid labor, the escape attempt that ended in murder, her desperate flight to the camp. She did not embellish. The plain truth was damning enough. Martin Hale spoke next. His voice was flat, weary, but unflinching. He confirmed the forged deeds, the false reports filed with complicit officials, the women who had arrived with hope and disappeared into unmarked graves or worse fates. He named names without hesitation. The web of complicity spread wide, touching men who had thought themselves safely insulated from consequences. Nikolai's deathbed statement, carefully transcribed by Dr. Kingsley as the mortally wounded man, faded in and out of consciousness after the explosion corroborated every major point. He had died roughly 2 hours after the blast. His last words were a whispered request that someone tell his elderly mother in Chicago that he had tried at the very end to be a better man than he had been. The ledger itself formed the documentary backbone of the case. Marshal Pierce spent an entire evening going through it, page by page, cross-referencing dates with land office records and freight manifests. His expression grew grimmer with each entry. Deputy Thomas Rigby was arrested within the week. Several of McGraw's surviving ranch hands were rounded up and jailed. McGraw's vast holdings were seized by territorial authorities to cover fines, reparations, and legal costs. His ranch was broken up and sold at public auction. A significant portion of the proceeds went to the families of the missing women. A smaller but meaningful sum was set aside for the Ash River camp. For Tokala's people, the gains were more modest, more fragile than justice should ever be. Marshal Pierce did not have the legal authority to grant them permanent title to their traditional winter grounds. But he did sign an official agreement backed by Martin Hale's testimony and pressure from Dr. Kingsley and a handful of newly chastened townspeople. An agreement that formally recognized the Lakota band's right to winter along the Ash River without harassment or interference. It was a thin line of ink on paper against the inexorable tide of Western expansion. But it kept federal soldiers and vigilante posses away from their lodges for now. The camp slowly, painfully returned to something approximating normal life. Lodges damaged during the siege were methodically repaired. Meat from the late winter hunt was smoked and stored. Children gradually returned to playing on the river ice. Their laughter was a fragile but genuine sound of healing. Tokala healed slowly. His body's recovery was hampered by infection that set in despite Dr. Kingsley's best efforts. For several days, he burned with fever, while Bina and Eliza took turns sitting vigil beside him. When the fever finally broke, he was left weak as a newborn, but alive. The wound in his side left a puckered scar that pulled painfully when he moved too quickly. But he was fundamentally whole. One afternoon in early March, as the ice on the river began to crack and groan with the first whispers of spring and the first brave patches of brown grass appeared on south-facing slopes, Tokala found Eliza standing alone on the rise above the camp. She was staring out at the prairie, a folded letter clutched in her hand. Her expression was distant, troubled. "What is that?" he asked, climbing up to stand beside her. "An offer," she said quietly. "From a respectable boarding house in Clay Bank. The marshal's wife arranged it. A chance to work as a teacher. Room and board included. Safe. Respectable." She paused. Her throat worked. "They also included coach fare east if I wanted. Back to St. Louis, or even all the way to New York. A chance to start completely over. Somewhere far from all this violence and pain." "What do you think about this offer?" Tokala asked carefully. Keeping his voice neutral, though, his heart hammered in his chest. Eliza was silent for a long moment. Her eyes tracked across the landscape below. The Lakota camp spread out along the river. Lodges arranged in their traditional circle. Smoke rising from cooking fires. The horse herd grazing peacefully on the first new grass. Children chasing chunks of river ice like boats, shrieking with laughter. Bina stood outside her lodge calling instructions in a mixture of Lakota and heavily accented English to a group of younger women who were scraping a fresh buffalo hide. Dr. Kingsley packed his medical bag after another long day of follow-up care. His face was lined with exhaustion, but also something that might have been contentment. Martin Hale worked alongside Lakota men at the new boundary fence, helping to mark grazing rights that for the first time acknowledged both settler and Lakota claims as equally valid. "I think," Eliza said slowly, choosing each word with exquisite care, "that running away to safety would mean leaving behind the only thing I have ever built in my life that actually matters." She looked at Tokala, really looked at him. Not just survival, not just avoiding danger, but building something real. Community, justice, purpose. She paused. "I am so tired of being property, of being freight on someone else's ledger. I want to help write new pages instead. Pages about people who matter, who have names and stories and futures." She took a breath. "I am not staying because of one person. I am staying because I finally found a place where I can be more than someone's bride or servant or victim. I found a place where my voice matters, where the work I do changes lives." Her voice strengthened. "I found home, Tokala, real home. Not a place someone promised me, not a place I was sent to, a place I helped build, a place I chose." Tokala stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. He allowed himself to feel a cautious hope. "Then stay. Help us build more." She looked down at the letter in her hands for a long moment. Then, with sudden decision, she tore it cleanly in half and let the pieces drift down the slope on the wind, tumbling away across the patchy snow. "I will," she said simply. A slow, genuine smile spread across Tokala's face, rare and precious as spring flowers in this harsh land. "Good. That is very good." Spring came slowly but inexorably to the northern plains, the country whites were beginning to call Dakota. The river ice broke up with great cracking booms that echoed across the prairie like thunder. Geese returned in vast, honking formations, darkening the sky. The grass grew thick and green. Buffalo herds began their migration. One morning in April, a freight wagon arrived from Clay Bank, sent by a church women's charitable circle that had heard the remarkable story. The Women's Auxiliary had expected to help her escape. Instead, learning of her decision to stay, they sent tools to support her choice books, writing paper slates and chalk primers in English and German for immigrant children, and most remarkably, a small but functional printing press. Eliza and Bina worked together to set up a canvas-sided shelter near the river and began conducting lessons. Lakota children learned to read and write English skills that would protect them in a world increasingly dominated by written contracts and legal documents they could not afford to sign blindly. White children from nearby homesteads, sent by parents who had decided that peace and coexistence were preferable to perpetual conflict, learned basic Lakota words and something of the history and culture of the people whose land they shared. Dr. Kingsley helped translate and mediate. His patience seemed endless. His belief in education as a path to understanding was unwavering. Even Martin Hale came to the lessons, sat in the back and laboriously learned to spell out simple words. His scarred hands were remarkably steady despite his age. He had been sentenced to 5 years of supervised labor and community service rather than hanging, a result of his full cooperation and the testimony of several Lakota elders who spoke on his behalf, who noted his genuine remorse and his labor helping rebuild after the siege. He chose to serve that sentence here, helping to build and maintain the school, working to establish fair trade relationships between the Lakota camp and white settlers. Tokala watched the lessons from a careful distance, arms folded across his chest, his face arranged in an expression of studied neutrality. But he made sure his people's lodges gradually migrated closer to the school shelter, and he personally maintained the path leading to it, keeping it clear of snow in winter and mud in spring. One evening in late April, as the sun set in spectacular shades of orange and gold over the endless prairie painting the teepees with warm light, Eliza closed the door of her small log cabin. It was modest. Just 4 sturdy walls, a cast-iron stove, a narrow bed, a table and 2 chairs, shelves for her growing collection of books. But it was entirely hers. She had built it with help from Bina and several Lakota men who had decided that a woman who fought as bravely as she had deserved a solid roof over her head. Outside, Tokala was checking the pony lines as the sun set, making sure all the stakes were secure, making sure the animals had access to water, moving with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned that small tasks done properly kept people alive. Eliza opened her door and leaned against the frame. The evening air was cool but no longer bitter on her face. "I am not moving," she called down to him, deliberately echoing his first command to her all those months ago in the depths of winter. "Until we are all strong enough to stand here together. All of us." He looked up from his work. Understanding passed between them like a current. Not grand declarations of impossible devotion, not flowery promises that could not be kept, but something far deeper and more durable. Shared work, shared dangers survived, shared commitment to building something better. The slow, steady, conscious decision to stay and fight for a future worth living rather than running to temporary safety. "No." Tokala agreed, walking toward her cabin with his characteristic measured pace. "We are not moving. We will stand here together." He climbed the 3 wooden steps to her small porch. For a long moment they stood facing each other in the fading golden light. His hand found hers, calloused palm against calloused palm, warm and solid and real. Neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. The language between them had been forged in snow and gunfire, in bandages and bullet wounds, in shared meals and shared fears, in the simple but profound refusal to give up when giving up would have been so much easier. Inside her cabin, Eliza had carefully pinned one of the salvaged ledger pages to the wall, not as a trophy of victory, but as a solemn reminder. Names written in fading ink, lives that had mattered, justice that had been won, however imperfectly, by ordinary people who had refused to look away when confronted with evil. Below the cabin, the camp settled into its evening rhythms. Fires glowed warmly in the gathering dusk. Children were called inside for the night. Horses stamped and whickered softly. The Ash River, freed at last from its winter prison, ran swift and clean and cold, carrying away the last remnants of ice and with them the memory of the darkest days. And on the rise above it all, 2 people stood together in comfortable silence, looking out over a land that had very nearly killed them both, but had ultimately failed. They were scarred, yes. Tired, certainly. Uncertain of what the future held, absolutely. But they were alive. They were free. They had won something real and precious. Not just survival, but justice, community, and the fragile but genuine possibility of peace. For the first time in longer than either of them could remember, that was enough, more than enough.